We're inching closer and closer and closer to the college football season actually getting underway. And if you're anything like me, you can't wait. So since it's so close, I think it's time to start predicting what's going to happen in the college football season. Who is going to win each group of five conference, and maybe most importantly, who's going to represent the group of five in the college football playoff? Because the way it's still constructed, one of these schools is going to have the chance to take on a really big, powerful, important school come December. And I think that, whether you like it or not, I'm a big fan of it. I think it's a great thing. I think it's one of the best things about college football is that even the little guy still gets a chance to win the national championship, which for a really long time didn't exist. You didn't have the chance to come from the American or Conference USA, Mountain West, MAC, Sun Belt to win the national championship. And now you do. Is it a great chance? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But the chance still exists, and I think that's cool. And I want to start with the school that I think everybody assumes is going to be the group of five representative, and it was the school that was last year. It's Boise State. Boise State, final year in the Mountain West. And I think the Broncos win the Mountain West. And I think they beat Colorado State to do it. If Braden Fowler-Nicolosi can play at the level that I think he's capable of, I don't see a reason why Colorado State can't win 9-10 games in 2025 and play in the Mountain West Championship against Boise State. Now, Boise State has a really interesting schedule this year because they play at Notre Dame. And while that is undeniably a pretty tough schedule in itself, a road game, they play at Air Force, at USF, who is not going to be a slouch by any stretch of the imagination, probably plans on being in the American Conference Championship picture on a Thursday night to open the season. Boise State plays at San Diego State, at Utah State, and at Nevada. That is not an easy road schedule by any stretch of the imagination. So while everybody, I think, is predicting Boise State to be the group of five representative, I don't think they're going to be the group of five representative because I think they're going to have probably two losses. I doubt that they go to South Bend and beat the Fighting Irish. And if they do, more power to them. They deserve a ton of credit, and that's only going to cement their spot in the college football playoff. But then the chances that they go just completely undefeated through the Mountain West doesn't feel super strongly because it's hard to win conference games. Any coach will tell you that. And the chances of you doing it undefeated, again, don't seem super high just because hardly anybody gets through their conference slate completely unscathed. And with two losses, I wonder if they're a shoo-in for the college football playoff like everybody else thinks they are. But we'll have that discussion later. I don't think Boise State makes the college football playoff, but I do think that they win the Mountain West. The next biggest, I think, challenger to, just for the record, I think that 98% of the time, the college football playoff representative for the group of five is going to come out of the American or starting next year, the Pac-12. That's what I think. I think the Pac-12 is going to be somewhat strong enough to not overtake the American, but rival it and have the likes of San Diego State, Boise State, Fresno State, et cetera, that those teams are going to be good enough to be viewed as relatively on par as with the American. The American is interesting because there are some teams who return a lot of production in 2025 for the American that I don't think are going to be all that great. And then the schools that are kind of at the bottom of that list are the schools that I think most people would project to be pretty good. I think I'm high on Memphis. I think Memphis has a chance to be really, really good. And I think Navy, led by their quarterback Blake Horvath, has a chance to be really good again. I'm picking Navy to win the American. But like Boise State, Navy plays at Notre Dame. And similarly to Boise State, I think that Navy could easily be 11-1 or 10-2 with you throw a loss to Notre Dame, which I don't feel like is unreasonable to say is probably a given. but then you throw in some other random game that you lose in conference play. And I picked Navy versus Memphis for the conference championship game. They play on Thanksgiving. They play at 7:30 on Thanksgiving night. And I think either that game sets up an American Conference Championship game rematch or flat out decides who makes the American Conference Championship game and then also who plays in the college football playoff. That game, as it sits here right now, I think has huge playoff implications, which is why I like the 12-team playoff, because in what other avenue of the sport, in what other iteration of the playoff championship format would you sit here and say the game between Navy and Memphis has huge playoff implications on Thanksgiving night other than a 12-team playoff? It's why I like it a lot. So I think Navy is kind of in that boat of teams who you could very easily view as a college football playoff team, which is wild. What with the conference championship game, then potentially them being the highest ranked college football playoff, or I beg your pardon, the highest ranked group of 5 school in the college football playoff, then they still got to play Army. It's a wild scenario, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility by any stretch of the imagination. The Navy is in that conversation. Then I think there are 2 other conferences where it's abundantly clear I don't think that their teams are going to play for the spot in the college football playoff, where it's the Sun Belt and the MAC. And I don't think that's necessarily a denigration of the Sun Belt so much, because I have James Madison playing Texas State in the Sun Belt championship game, and I'm going to pick Texas State. Similar to Boise State, final year in the Sun Belt for Texas State. James Madison should be pretty good. Texas State should be pretty good. And the thing about James Madison and Texas State is, you look at Texas State, they have kind of that same schedule build as Boise State did last year, where they have a high-profile game against a non-conference Power 4 opponent. For instance, this year Texas State is playing at Arizona State. That is a game that nobody's going to project the Bobcats to win. So if that's your one loss, and you go through the rest of the conference schedule and make it to the conference championship game, you are potentially 11-1. Texas State plays James Madison on a Tuesday night in October, which I think is going to be a fun, really interesting matchup that should draw some eyeballs when it's going to be on ESPN2. So I think you get another rematch in the championship game. I'll pick James Madison to win the regular season game and Texas State to win the conference championship game. I also think the MAC, just by the way that their schedules are built out, Ohio plays 2 Power 4 games after winning the conference championship a season ago. I don't. They play, for instance, they play West Virginia at home, which I think is one of the really more interesting, one of the more interesting group of 5 versus Power 4 games in 2025, that West Virginia is going to Ohio. I mean, it's not a short drive by any stretch of the imagination, and by some metrics, Ohio season tickets have almost been sold out by West Virginia fans, because it's like $60 for season tickets, and it, on the secondary market, it's like $250 to get into the Ohio West Virginia games. So Mountaineer fans are just like, well, hell, it's like an 80-mile drive. I'll pay $60 for my ticket and get season tickets to Ohio, rather than pay $250 on the secondary market. But I think Ohio is going to win the MAC again. Parker Navarro is one of the better group of 5 quarterbacks and has played really well last year when they won the MAC for the first time in 60 years. And I think they're going to do it again this year. The problem with Ohio being the highest rated group of 5 champion is that their first 3 games are at Rutgers versus West Virginia and at Ohio State. If you go 1-2 in those matchups, you have had a hell of a start to the season. The chances that you go 1-2 probably aren't super high. And Toledo is not as bad because their big game is on the road at Kentucky, which last year Toledo went to Mississippi State and put a whooping on the Bulldogs. And I think Kentucky's kind of viewed as being in that same stratosphere that Mississippi State was last year. So it's not a foregone conclusion that the Wildcats win that game 43-7, right? Like, I think I don't know that it's a great chance, but there's a chance that Toledo goes to Lexington and wins. And if they do that, they got a great chance to be a 10-win, 11-win, 12-win team and could certainly change the conversation. But as I've mentioned before, it's not easy to do. Plus, they play at Washington State, which if it was flip-flopped, they were playing at Washington State on Saturday, August 30th, because Washington State lost literally everything from last year's team, I might pick Toledo to be a 11-1, 12-0 team. If they were playing Kentucky at the end of October, when they've been beaten, banged up, roughed up by the SEC, and probably given up on their season at that point, I think it's not crazy to think Toledo could be a 11-win team. But I think with Ohio playing Rutgers, West Virginia, Ohio State to start the season, there's a 0% chance that they're going to be 3-0 after that stretch. And I kind of subscribe to the theory that the Group of 5 champ is almost universally going to be the school that has the lowest number in the loss column, which is why I think the Conference USA championship game is really important, because I'll pick Western Kentucky to play Liberty. There's a real good chance Liberty is undefeated throughout their college football season. They play an FCS school in Maine. They play 2 first-year FBS schools in Delaware and Missouri State during the conference slate, neither of which is expected to be very good, if at all. Their toughest game of the season is they have a home game against James Madison. And going back to Memphis versus Navy would never be viewed as a big-time college football playoff implications at stake game in a 4-team college football playoff. Under no circumstances would Liberty versus James Madison be viewed as a college football playoff altering game. But if Liberty wins that game, I have a hard time seeing many losses, if a loss at all, on their schedule. They got Ethan Vasco to transfer from Coastal Carolina to follow his old coach, Jamie Chadwell, to Liberty. He, like Caden Salter, can run a little bit. He can do the things that Liberty wants to do in that offense. I think Liberty's going to go 13-0, to tell you the truth. And if they're not, they're 12-1. And then that brings up a whole different conversation of they're 12-1, but then what do we do with James Madison, who beat Liberty, but maybe James Madison is 11-2? I think the Group of 5 spot is as up for grabs as it could possibly be, because of that Boise State game at Notre Dame throws a wrench into the whole thing, because I don't think it's unreasonable to think that the Broncos lose a Mountain West game at some point. They were dangerously close to losing the conference championship game to UNLV last year. The Rebs have not named their starting quarterback yet, but I would like to think that Dan Mullen is going to make them better somewhat instantly and give Boise State a tougher challenge than damn near anybody else did in the Mountain West last year. I think that this is a really interesting Group of 5 slate. And I don't know that, despite Boise State being kind of viewed as the foregone conclusion, they're going to be the team to play in a college football playoff. I think if Liberty goes 13-0, it's tough to say, barring Boise State beating Notre Dame and then losing to somebody else, or barring Boise State being 13-0. I think it's going to be tough to throw out a undefeated Group of 5 champion like Liberty in this completely hypothesized scenario. If Boise State's 12-1 and Liberty's 13-0, I would tell you that Boise State probably deserves it. But undefeated's undefeated. And I think that that's going to be really hard to turn down. I think it'd be really cool if that's the way it all shook out, or if that was a scenario. It doesn't even have to be those teams. You got 13-0 MAC team versus a 12-1 Boise State, a 12-1 Navy, 12-1 Memphis. What do you do then? We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but it sure is fun to think about. Want to know your thoughts? Who's going to represent the group of 5 in the college football playoff? Let me know in the comments below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode.